Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. In today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to make a cute peplum top. For this halter top, I thought about what would happen if festival met fairy, and this is where we landed. A feminine make that's fun, whimsy, and sophisticated. Speaking of, if you're looking for more sophisticated makes or maybe something fun and whimsy, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of crochet tutorials and patterns with more dropping weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 275 grams of yarn, and that's 610 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. Now there is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you could have any talent, which one would you choose? I would choose singing in a heartbeat. I love singing so much, but I'm not very good at it. Details for the giveaway down below. We are using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain the height that we'd like for our waistband to be. I'd like for my waistband to be just about 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 8. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1 and get ready to do our first slip stitch row. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook, and that is our first slip stitch. Let's do that again. Into that next chain, insert, yarn over, gently pull through everything, and then once more into that next chain, insert, pull through everything. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, making sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row can be a little too tight to work into. Now that we're all at the end of our row 1, let's get started on row 2, which is another slip stitch row. So chain 1, that doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and flip our work. Then from here, finding that last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, we're going to insert, then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Again, into the next stitch, insert into that back loop, yarn over, and gently pull through everything again. And from here, we're going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Our row 2 is now complete. We're going to continue to repeat this previous row. So chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and we aren't going to be doing any increases or decreases. So just continue to repeat this previous row until we have a waistband portion that can stretch over the widest part of our bust, but we're only doing the front half first. So placing your first row at mid underarm, stretching it, because remember our back loop slip stitch rows do have some decent amount of stretch to it, over the widest part of our bust, over to the other side of our mid underarm. Then I'll meet you back right after an even number of rows. Alrighty, so we are back. I have just finished up the first half of my waistband, and this is going to be the front panel. So before we move on with the second half of our waistband, we're going to need to insert some stitch markers into some places, as you guys can see. So first things first, we're going to insert our stitch marker into the bottom half of our waistband. The bottom half is the opposite end from where our hook is, and we're all going to insert our stitch markers just into the first side row and into the last side row. That's just so we know where the front panel starts and ends. Next, we're going to be inserting our stitch markers into the opposite side of our waistband, which is now the edge that our hook is into. And we're going to be inserting our stitch markers into our 2 middle side rows. And we should all have 2 side rows because we all should have ended after an even number of rows. So just to let you guys know, I have a total of 58 rows. This width is roughly 10 inches or 25 centimeters unstretched. So since I have a total of 58 rows, my 2 middle rows is 29 and 30. So I just inserted my stitch markers into those 2 rows. And now we're going to finish up with the second half of our waistband, which is actually just going to be more back loop slip stitch rows for the same amount of rows that we did for this front panel. So from here, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then do our following back loop slip stitch row, and then I'll meet you back. So I've just finished up my following back loop slip stitch row, and this is the first row for the back panel. And all I did was I made sure to insert my stitch marker into the top of that side row, just so we know where the back panel is going to start and end once we get there as well. So just continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows for the same amount of rows that we had for the first half of our waistband, and then I'll meet you back after the last row. Alrighty, so we are back. The entirety of the length of my waistband is now complete. Now we're going to need to insert our stitch markers into a few more places. So the next stitch marker that we're going to insert is just going to be into the top of that last row that we did for our waistband, so that we know that this is where the back panel starts and ends. And then within the front panel and the back panel, we're then going to be inserting our stitch markers into the 2 middle rows that we have within both the front and the back. And we do want to make sure that it is along the bottom, so along the same edge where we separated the front and the back panel. So the numbers that we should have should be the same that we did for the top that I mentioned. So for me, my 2 middle stitches that I have is my 29th and my 30th row, and I inserted my stitch marker into there. And then for the back panel, I inserted my stitch markers into the same 2 stitches because we should have the same amount of rows on both sides. So this is what the entirety of our band should look like. The edge with the most amount of stitch markers is going to be the bottom, and the one with just the 2 along the top is going to be the top. And now we're going to fold our work in half to seam everything together. So now that our work is folded in half, we're now going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and then we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So we're going to yarn over and pull through everything on our hook and start with a chain 1 just to secure. Then we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert into that front loop only. Then into the back panel, find that first available stitch and insert only into that back loop. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3, and that is our first seam stitch. Let's do this again. Into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. Then into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through everything, and that's it. We're going to continue with this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and when we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alrighty, so now that everything is all seamed up, we did do a chain up of 1 and cut right after that last stitch, and now we're going to get started on the top half of our piece. So we're going to make sure that our work is slipped right side out, meaning the seam that we just did is along the outside because the outside loop slip stitch seam is supposed to look like another back loop slip stitch row. And then we're going to insert our hook into the top half of our waistband so that it's going to be the half that has the least amount of stitch markers into it. Then all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row, making sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into those stitches once we reach it. So I've inserted my hook into the stitch that I have that's nearest to my side seam. Insert my yarn onto my hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 just to secure. Then from here, 1 single crochet into every side row. So we're all going to start by finding our first side row, and this is mine right here. It's this raised row, so I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook with just 1 single crochet. This is my following side row, which is this divot. I'm going to find that top loop and single crochet. Let's do this again. This raised row is my following side row, so find that top loop and single. And this divot is my following side row, so just insert your hook in through there with another single. Continue with 1 single crochet into every side row, so this row should end with the same amount of stitches as rows that we made for our waistband. And like I said, we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into the stitches once we reach there, because we do still want to make sure that we know where the middle is. Now, one last tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So once when the single crochet row is completed, try your piece on, making sure that it's not too tight. If it is a little too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. Alright, we made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Everything is fitting quite nicely, so we did slip stitch into that chain space. So this row is complete. Now we're going to get started on our netting. So what we're going to do is start by doing a chain 3. Now that we have our chain 3, that height is going to count as a double crochet. Now we're going to chain 1, which is just going to count as a chain, but we should have a total of 4 chains in total. Then we're going to yarn over, preparing for a double crochet. Then we're going to skip that first stitch and into the next, insert with a double crochet. And that is our first netting stitch. Let's do this again. We're going to chain 1, skip a stitch, and into the next stitch, we're going to insert with a double crochet. So insert, pull through 2, pull through 2, and that's it. We're actually just going to make our way all the way around, continuing on with this. But we do want to make sure that once we reach our stitch markers, we are still inserting our stitch markers into those stitches because we are going to need to know where the middle is. Alright, so we've made our way all the way around with our first netting row. Now I'm just going to show you how we're going to connect it. So everyone's last stitch for this netting row should have been a double crochet. Now we're going to count up the 3 chains that we made when we started this row. Here's 1, 2, 3. We are then going to slip stitch into that 3rd chain. So insert, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. Now we're going to get started on the following row, and that's just going to be a double crochet row. So all we're going to do is chain 3. That does not count as a stitch. That's our turning chain, and flip our work, and then just put 1 double crochet into every stitch and chain space, making our way all the way around, making sure that we are still inserting our stitch markers into the tops of those stitches because we still need to know which stitches are our middle stitches. And just as another really quick tip, our previous netting row and the row that we're about to do should have the same amount of stitches as rows that we made for the waistband. Our solid double crochet row is complete. We're going to be doing another solid double crochet row. So right after we have slip stitched into that 3rd chain, chain 3, flip your work, and then put 1 double crochet into every stitch again, making sure that we are still inserting our stitch markers into the middle stitches. Alright, so our second solid double crochet row is complete. Now we're going to do 1 more netting row, just like the first netting row that we did. So right after we have slip stitched into our 3rd chain, we're all going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now that we have flipped our work, we're going to chain 1 additional chain, so we should have a total of 4 chains. Then we're going to yarn over, skip that first stitch, and into that next stitch with a double crochet, forming our first net. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, and double crochet into the next, and continue this, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, slip stitch into our 3rd chain that we made, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back. And as one last quick tip, this row should have the same amount of stitches as rows that we made for the waistband again. Alrighty, so we are back. We have finished up our netting row and did a chain up of 1 and cut, and now we're going to get started on our cups. So that's going to be done separately from what we've already done, so we're just going to set this aside for now. Now our cups are going to be these rectangular cups, so let's get this started. So we're all going to start by making a chain that starts from the outside of our chest in to the middle of our collarbone. Now I need about 2.5 inches or 7 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. Now that we all have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row, so block off that last chain and do a chain 3. That chain 3 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, then we're all going to yarn over. Insert your hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the 4th chain from our hook, then put 1 double crochet into every chain. Now that we have our first row for our cup complete, all we're going to do is continue to do double crochet rows with no increases and no decreases until we get the height of half of our cup that we need. So placing our first row right underneath our underbust, or roughly where an underwire would be, we're just going to continue with double crochet rows with no increases and no decreases until we reach up to about mid-chest. And then I'll meet you back so that we can get started on filling it out, making it taller and wider. I am back and I have the first portion of my cup completed. I have 4 rows and this height is 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Now from here we're going to start working on our curved rows. So to get started on our following row, we're all going to chain 3, flip our work, and then put 1 double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last stitch that we have. Alright, so we've made our way all the way down, putting 1 double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. Now into that last one, because we need this to curve around to the side of our piece, we're going to do an increase of 5 double crochets. So that's just 5 double crochets into that last stitch. So yarn over, into the last stitch of this row, we're going to insert with 1 double, into that same last stitch with a second double, into that same last stitch with a third double, but into the third double crochet we are going to be inserting our stitch marker because that is going to be our middle stitch for this increase. And then 2 more double crochets into that same last stitch. So here is my 4th double crochet, and then here is my 5th double crochet. And as you guys can see, our work is starting to curve on us, and now we should be looking at the side of our double crochets, and all we're going to do is put 2 double crochets into every side row. So let's get this started together. We're all going to start with a yarn over and finding our first side row, which this is mine right here. I'm going to insert into that top loop with 2 double crochets. So into that top loop with 1 double, and then into that same top loop with a second double crochet. Now into the next side row, yarn over, into that next side row's top loop, insert with 2 double crochets again. So there's 1, into that same top loop with 2. We're just going to continue to do this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. Then at the end of the row, chain 3, flip your work, and then put 1 double crochet into every stitch until we reach our stitch marker. We are back. We are at the increase portion of our second curve row, and now into our stitch marker stitch we're going to be doing an increase of 3 double crochets. So yarn over and into that corner stitch or our stitch marker stitch, insert with 3 doubles, and our stitch marker is going to be inserted into the second. So there's my first double crochet, into that same middle stitch with a second double crochet. Make sure you're inserting your stitch marker into the second one because that is our new middle stitch. And then a third double crochet into that same middle stitch. Then finish off the row with 1 double crochet into every stitch. Alright, we are back. Our second curve row is complete. Now all we're going to do is just chain 3, flip our work, put 1 double crochet into every stitch, and then once we reach our stitch marker, an increase of 3 double crochets while making sure to insert your stitch marker into that middle stitch. Then close off the row with 1 double crochet into the rest of our stitches. We're just going to continue to repeat that row until our cup becomes the total width and height that we need it to be. And when we have the total size of the cup completed, I will meet you guys back along the inside of our cup, and then we can single crochet across the bottom together. I am back with my cup. I have a total of 9 rows, with the total width being 5.5 inches and the height being 4.5 inches. We all should have ended along the inner corner, and now we're just going to single crochet across the bottom so that it's easier to connect to the body portion that we already have. So from this corner, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now all we're going to do is put 2 single crochets into every side double crochet row, then 1 single crochet into every stitch. So let's get this started. This is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with a single crochet. Now into that same top loop, I'm going to insert with another single crochet. That's basically it. We're just going to continue on with this single crochet row when we don't have any more stitches left to work into. So once we reach this corner over here, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then make 1 more cup that is exactly the same. Then I'll meet you guys back. Alright, so we are back. Both of our cups are now completed, and now we're going to seam it onto the bottom portion that we have already made for ourselves. So first things first, we're going to grab our cups, we're going to place the inner corners nearest to each other, then we're going to find our 2 middle stitches within the body, and then all we're going to do is take our cups and flip them over our work so that our seams are going to be along the inside. So once when we flip our cups back up, the seams for the cups are along the inside. So from here, all we're going to do is insert our hook into our corner stitch of our cup and then into our middle stitch within the body portion. So we're going to do this one first for me. So I'm just going to place this cup off to the side. So into the bottom corner stitch of my cup, I'm going to insert my hook. Then into my stitch marker stitch, I'm going to insert my hook in through there as well. Then insert my yarn onto my hook. I'm going to pull through and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then from here, we're just going to single crochet, working in through both the cup and the body portion at the same time. So let's all start by finding that next stitch into our cup, insert your hook. Into the next stitch into the body portion, we're going to insert our hook in through there, and then single crochet them together. Let's do this again. Into the next stitch into the cup, next stitch into the body portion, and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other cup. Alrighty, so we are back. This is what our piece should be looking like once when everything is flipped right side out. And now we're going to be working on our top detail. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out. So the seams that we have for the cup are now along the insides. And then we're going to be inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of our cup. Then we're going to be doing a netting row. So go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook and start with a chain 3. Now that we have our chain 3, this does count as a stitch for this row. We're going to chain an extra one, so 4 in total. Then, just like how we did for the body netting portion, we're going to yarn over, skip that following stitch, and into the stitch right after that, do a double crochet. So this is per usual. To do one more, chain 1, skip a stitch, double crochet into the next, and we're just going to continue on with our netting until we reach our stitch marker stitch. Now our netting could be worked into that stitch marker stitch or into the stitch right after, but either stitch are fine. I will meet you guys back once we are worked into one of these 2 stitches. So we have made our way all the way down with our mesh stitches. Now we're going to do our middle stitch. So this is going to be a little bit different for everyone, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. Right after our last double crochet, what we're going to do is chain 1. And then from here, we're going to yarn over for the same amount of rows that we had for our cups. So since I had a total of 9 rows for my cups, I'm going to yarn over 9 times. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Then once we have all of those yarn overs, we're going to be inserting our hook into one of the stitches that we have in between our cups. Now we don't have a specific stitch to stick our hook into, we're just going to pick one, and then we're going to pull through. So I'm just going to insert my hook into this stitch right here, yarn over, and pull through. Then from here, no matter how many yarn overs we had, we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 until we all have 1 loop left on our hook. But a really quick tip, we're going to want to make sure that we're keeping our working yarn decently taut, otherwise we could form a really big gap right next to our chain that we just made. So we're going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. There's 1, there's 2. Again, yarn over, pull through 2, 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 and I am almost finished. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. And now we have our tall stitch all finished up. Now we're going to mirror everything we did here on the other side. So right after we finish up our tall stitch, we're going to chain 1. And all we're going to do is double crochet into the same stitch that our last double crochet is worked into. So like I said, it could be worked into our stitch marker stitch or into the stitch right after. Mine is worked into the stitch right after, so I'm just going to double crochet into the stitch right after my stitch marker on this side. So I'm going to yarn over into my following stitch, because that's where my last double crochet is worked into. I'm going to double crochet once and then do our netting row until we reach the end of the row. So chain 1, skip a stitch and into the next with a double crochet, and continue this, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row. Alrighty, so we are back and our first netting row is complete. Now, one really quick tip that I have for you guys is, as you guys can see, our cup may start to buckle once when our one long stitch is into place, but that is completely fine. It should all even out once when everything is worn. What we're going to do from here is a solid double crochet row with a decrease in the middle. So we're going to chain 3, flip our work, and then put 1 double crochet into every stitch until we are worked into our last double crochet right over here. So we've just put 1 double crochet into every stitch and we're worked into our last double crochet right here. Now the decrease that we're going to do is we're going to be skipping our 3 middle stitches. So yarn over. Our middle stitches should be our chain, our tall stitch, and then another chain. So into the top of the double crochet on the other side of our cup, just insert with a double crochet. Then continue with 1 double crochet into the rest of our stitches. Alrighty, so we are back. Our double crochet row is complete. Now we're going to get started on our row 3, which is going to be a netting row again. So chain 3, that chain 3 is going to count as a stitch, chain an extra chain, Then do our netting all the way down until we have 3 stitches left on this side of our cup. So we have just made our way all the way down with our netting, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 stitches left on this side of our cup. Now we're going to mirror everything we did here on the other side. So the last stitch that we all should have done should have been a double crochet. So we're going to double crochet into the 4th stitch on this side of our cup because we need to skip these 3 stitches on this side. So all we're going to do is yarn over, and then starting with this double crochet, count 1, 2, 3, into that following, insert with a double crochet. And now that we have that, continue on with our netting until we reach the end of the row. Alrighty, so our 3rd row for our chest detail is complete. Our following row is going to be a double crochet row. So from where we're at, chain 3, flip our work, and then put 1 double crochet into every stitch. Alrighty, so our first 1, 2, 3, 4 rows are finished for the chest detail. Our following 2 rows are going to be netting rows, so fairly simple. I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to chain 3, that's going to count as a stitch, chain an extra, so 4 chains in total, skip a stitch, double crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. Then at the end of that row, chain 3, flip our work, and then repeat, working our way back, and then I'll meet you guys back. We are back. Our following 2 netting rows are complete, and the last row that we're all going to do for our chest detail is a single crochet row. So from where we're at, chain 1, flip our work, and then put 1 single crochet into every stitch and chain space, making our way all the way across. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so we are back. My single crochet row is complete, and I did do a chain up of 1 and cut. Now this is the height that I would like for my chest detail to be. If you guys would like to add more rows to get a little bit more height, that is completely up to you, and you guys can choose your design that you want from this point on. But whenever we have the entirety of our chest completely finished, now we're going to get started on the bottom peplum portion. So let's all make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and then we are going to take a look at the bottom of our piece. So what we're all going to want to do is start by inserting your hook into any one of our side rows that our stitch marker is in. That's along the side, so it can be on the side that's nearest to our side seam or on the opposite side, and we're going to do a single crochet row. So this single crochet row is going to be done completely the same as our first single crochet row done right after we finished up our waistband and seam. So it's just going to be 1 single crochet into every side row, and we do want to make sure that we're bringing our stitch markers with us for that row as well. Once when the single crochet row is finished, try on your piece just to make sure that everything is fitting nicely, because just like that single crochet row, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. Once when the single crochet row is complete, I will meet you guys back. Alrighty, so our single crochet row is complete. Now we're going to get started on our peplum. So right after we have slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the highest part of our peplum to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 8. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. Then we're all going to start with an increase of 2 half double crochets. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the 3rd chain from our hook, yarn over, and insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, that's our first half double crochet, and another half double crochet into that same chain. So yarn over, into that same first chain, pull through all 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. Alright, so our row 1 is complete. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So into that next available stitch that we have, which should be a stitch marker stitch, doesn't matter which side you're working on, we're going to slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base. I'm going to take my stitch marker out now because I don't need it anymore. Then we're just going to yarn over and pull through everything to connect our row 1. Then in order to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, so into there, insert, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. And none of those slip stitches count as a stitch. Then we're going to flip our work and then put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, so yarn over. Into the last stitch from our previous row, not worked into those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then yarn over, pull through all 3. Then 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. Now we're at the end of our row 2. So getting started on our row 3, it's going to be done pretty much the same way as our row 1, now just within the back loops. So chain 2, that doesn't count as a stitch. We're going to flip our work and start with an increase of 2 back loop half doubles. So yarn over into that first stitch, insert into that back loop with 1 back loop half double, and then into that same first stitch with a second back loop half double crochet. Then from here, 1 back loop half double into every stitch. Now that we have our row 3 nearly finished, we're now going to connect it into the base. So since we want a floofier peplum, what we're going to do is slip stitch it into the stitch that our previous row is coming out of, so it will be occupied. So all we're going to do is just find the last stitch that our previous row is coming out of and slip stitch it into there, and now our row 3 is connected. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of the slip stitches into the base count as a stitch. Flip our work and then put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 2, flip your work, start the following row off with an increase of 2 back loop half doubles, then 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the base just once more. Alright, so we are back and we should all have a total of 5 rows nearly finished. Now we're just going to connect it into the base together once more. So as a refresher, find that stitch that our previous row is worked out of, slip stitch into there to close off our odd number row, and then to work our way up to the following row, just find that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch it into there, and just continue to repeat these 2 rows until we are finally worked into our first middle stitch marker stitch. Now we should all end along the base or right after an odd number row, so I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the decrease portion of our peplum right after that. Alrighty, so we are back with the first half of our peplum detail. Now we all should have ended along the base, and now we're going to do basically the same thing on this side, but instead of increases into every other row, we're going to be doing decreases. So what we're going to do to get started on our following side is slip stitch into that next available stitch, which should be our following stitch marker stitch. Then put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of the row so we can do our decrease together. Alright, so we are back. We made our way all the way down with our first row for the decrease side of our peplum. Now just to get started on the following row, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. Then how we're going to do our decrease is yarn over. Insert your hook into that first back loop, pull through, then into that next stitch's back loop, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, and that is our decrease. From here, 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, then connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing this entire time. Then just continue to repeat these 2 rows until we reach our following stitch marker stitch, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so we are back and the entirety of the first half of our peplum is complete. Now right after that last row, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut. Then just insert your hook into our following stitch marker stitch, since we all should have ended right next to both of our stitch markers for the side, and then repeat everything we did here for the other side. Once we have the other portion of our peplum all finished up, I'll meet you guys back to seam it all together. We are back and the entirety of our peplum is completed. Now we're just going to seam up the sides, so let's all make sure that our work is slipped wrong side out first. So all we're going to do is the same seam that we did connecting the cups to the body. So just find that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet them together. Let's do one more. Next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the back, and single crochet, and continue this until we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. We are back. Everything is all seamed up, so now the last thing we're going to do is just clean up the edges and make our chain while we're at it. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is slipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to be inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of our chest detail, and we're going to start with a single crochet row down the sides. So go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and working down the side of our top detail, we're just going to be putting 2 single crochets into every side row, since they're all basically side double crochets. So we're all going to start by finding that first side row. Since this is a single crochet, it's just going to be 1 single crochet into there, and finish up that single, but from here it's going to be 2 singles into every side double crochet row. So just find that top loop, insert with a single into that same top loop with another single. Let's do that again. This is my following side row. Insert your hook in through there, with one, and then into that same top loop with a second single crochet. And we're just going to continue this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. Once we make our way all the way down, all we're going to do is just make our way around the back, putting one single crochet into every stitch. And then once we reach this corner over here, we're going to work our way up the side of our top detail, remembering to put 2 single crochets into every double crochet row, and I'll meet you back at this top corner. Alright, so we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row and made our way all the way up to this corner. Once we reach this corner, this is the perfect time just to make the chain for our strap. So right after we do our last single crochet, we're just going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our strap to be. So from here, I just made a chain of 75, that's roughly 9 inches or 22 centimeters. And now we're going to insert our hook into the top corner stitch of this other side that we have here, make the same chain, and do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that we have both of our straps all finished up, we are done. Last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!